Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Stuart Gray. I'm the Education Technology Consultant at the Western Quebec School Board, and I work alongside Lisa Diner, who is the receive for our board. And today we're going to talk about engagement in online learning with Google for Education. So I know a lot of you have experience previously using Google for Education tools, and today's focus is really about looking at ways that we can find some of the subtle details within the applications to try to enhance and improve engagement in an online learning environment. This whole conference is all about distance education strategies and trying to connect with our students remotely. So that's what we're going to look at today here. So I'm going to switch to, you can see my screen here, and I'll do just a little introduction as to what we're going to cover in terms of our learning intentions, and also a little about my colleague Lisa, who's going to be joining us too as a moderator in the group. So this is our session today. Thanks for joining us. I pasted in the chat, it should be pinned at the top. It's a link, a view-only link to the same slide deck. So if you want to navigate through this slide deck at your own pace at any point, you are welcome to do that. You can use that link. It includes some resources that we're going to be sharing during the session, and they're all hyperlinked as well within this Google slide doc so that you can have access to that after the session's done. This is a YouTube live event. If you're joining for your first YouTube live event, welcome. It's a neat way to engage with people, again, through a platform where you have a little more control in terms of the moderation of things, but there is still a live chat, which I can see lots of people are already actively typing into, which is great. Please take advantage of that. Again, this is not the same as a synchronous online meeting through Google Meet or through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, but it is still something that is supposed to be live and interactive. And so I encourage you to use the chat, ask any questions that are on your mind really at any point. It doesn't have to be specifically what we're talking about now, but feel free to take advantage of that chat. Lisa, as I mentioned, is in here as a moderator. So is James as well. And so, James specifically can help answer if there's technical questions related to connection, things like that. Lisa can really probably answer any question you might have on your mind about Google for Education. So take advantage of that chat there. So this is the team. As I'd introduce myself again, I've been a teacher at Sims and Darcy McGee High School, which, if you know the Western Quebec School Board, that's one of our bigger high schools in Gatineau. And I taught grades 7 through 11, math, science, chemistry, and then started in my role as a tech consultant with the board last fall in September of 2019. And Lisa's been in our board for over 20 years, and so we work very closely together doing things just like this. Here are our learning intentions for the day. So we are going to look at Google Meet best practices for student success being the first thing. We're gonna try to do something a little different where there is going to be this portion of the YouTube live event, but for those of you who are, I saw some comments in the chat, people saying there's some serious already technology, I think, from some people in the group. If you are someone who feels comfortable multitasking and can follow along but also be working on different things, we're going to share a set of Google for Education credentials that people can actually log in and could join a Google Classroom that I'm going to be demonstrating things from. And you can actually join in as a student, if you like, into a Google Meet that we're going to use. So that's something, and as I say that, I'm going to do one thing right now very quickly here so that nobody else starts the Google meeting before I do, and we'll talk about that in just a sec, but I'm going to start this Google Meet so that when we do shift over to use this right now, I'll be the first one who joined in. And I'll explain why that is in just a sec. All right, so that's all set now. So our intentions, again, it's really going to start with Google Meet, and we're going to look at all of the ins and outs of Google Meet and hopefully show different elements of the program that you may not have been familiar with before. And then we're going to shift to looking at collaborative learning ideas and ways that you can facilitate collaborative learning in an online class. So things you can do synchronously with your students, but also things that can be accessed outside of class hours asynchronously. But really, one of the tools we're going to focus on is something called Google Jamboard, which if you haven't seen it before, it's a fantastic tool, and it's really nicely integrated now with Google Meet, where you can start these collaborative sessions right from your meeting very simply. So we're going to look at that, and this will hopefully be one of the takeaways from today's session. Is I've collected lots of Google Jamboard templates over the last 2 years. So I've got a pretty big folder, Google Drive folder of Google Jamboard templates, and I'm going to share those with everybody. They're going to be linked in the slide deck. And again, it'll be a view-only link to the folder, but you can just simply make a copy. If you have a Google for Education domain already, if you have an account, you can just make a copy of that folder, and you will have all these pre-created Jamboard templates that you can use with your students. And that's something, it's stuff that's been shared with me. A lot of these I didn't create myself, but it's things that have been shared. And there's some really, really great pre-created templates that I'll share with you. And then the last piece, our last learning intention, is about checks for understanding and how to do that in real time. And that can be, again, just a simple quick check-in, or we could be looking at more, we'll also look at different formative assessment options. And we'll look at doing that through a variety of different pieces of the Google for Education domain. Google Forms being one of them, but we'll also look at a couple other strategies as well. So those are our intentions for today. If there are any questions, I see some people just saying, yes, there's some multitaskers here. That's great, because you can help be our kind of guinea pigs, our demo for as we do like a live class in Google Meet. You can join in and you can demonstrate how sometimes people use the chat to message to a group and sometimes get people off task, but you can help demonstrate this, and I'll show those moderation controls you have as a teacher. So one of the first things before we dive into those 3 learning intentions, everything that we're going to cover today, again, you have the slide deck available, but really all of the ins and outs, the details of every one of these platforms, there are great training resources now available at what's called the Google for Education Teacher Center. And so I wanted to reference this right off the start, and I'm actually going to navigate there now to show you what that looks like. But this is something that Google's really improved over the last couple of years, that it is a fantastic kind of all-in-one hub for education specifically. It's geared completely towards teachers to learn all of the details of what's available in Google for Education. So this is the homepage here, and it's really broken down into, you have training courses that'll take you through step by step through modules to learn all of these details. Whether you're a beginner with Google for Education or whether you're a more advanced user, there's different learning paths for that. You also have access to just product guides and pages that overview these different elements of Google for Education. So Classroom, Forms, Docs, Slides, Meet. These pages are great kind of one-stop shop places where it introduces you to that tool, but also then gets into lots of in-depth information about really how you can leverage that for your best student outcomes. So this is a great site to reference. Like, this is kind of my go-to place as well when I'm trying to further my learning of Google for Education. And again, those product guides are things you can use quickly, but I'd really recommend, if you want to dive in, doing these training courses is really a fantastic way to learn all of the details. I did both of these training courses last March. And then if you were interested at the end, then you can complete a certification exam. And after completing the first, this Learn the Basics of G Suite, that will give you all of the detail you need to complete the Google for Education Level 1 certification exam if you're interested. And then the advanced course will allow you to complete the Level 2 certification exam. And so, yeah, it's something that the examinations themselves are pretty neat, because they actually get you to carry out tasks that a teacher would be doing in the Google for Education world in real time, in a live domain. So you actually have to demonstrate that you can carry out all these tasks that a teacher would be doing in a virtual environment, in a digital hub. So it's something that if you're interested in going further with your learning, it's a really great program, and it allows you, as I said, to get these certifications of level 1 and 2 certified educator. That's also if you are interested. I know there's a couple other consultants out there. If you're interested in moving towards becoming a trainer and doing training with colleagues, with teachers in your board, or just others, to get into the Google Certified Trainer program, you do have to complete this level 2 certification exam first. But yeah, it's really a fantastic way to grow your knowledge of the tool, even if it's something you've been using for a long time. I learned a huge amount doing those courses, even though I've been using Google Classroom and Google for Education tools for about the last 9 years or so. So I'm going to go back into the slide deck here. And yes, you can absolutely share that in your handbook. I'm watching the chats on the side here, doing my best to have a kind of multi-monitor setup here. But yeah, Sadia asked, you can absolutely share the slide deck. You know, that Education Center, obviously that's Google's public training site. So absolutely, any content that we're sharing today, you can feel free to share with your peers. So without further ado, we're going to try to dive right in to the interactive portion of this session. Now, this is where I'll say it's like a choose your own adventure. If you would prefer to just watch the live stream and just follow what we're doing, I'm going to be sharing my screen throughout the day, and you'll see that there will be other people joined in real time, so you'll be able to see what that interaction looks like in Google Meet and in Classroom. But if you want to engage in that yourself, you can. What we've set up here is, in a moment, you can click on this link, and I'm gonna paste that link into the chat itself. So I'll paste that in there now. But if you would like, you can go to that site. All of these bit.ly links, by the way, are, if you've never used bit.ly before, they are case-sensitive links. So you have to type them in. If they're all lowercase, make sure you type it in all lowercase. But if you would like, I've just pasted into the chat there now. By the way, we're using live stream here. I've set the resolution at 720p, which is HD, but not full HD. It's at 30 frames per second, and I've got it on what's called low latency. So hopefully it allows us to have a fairly real-time experience. You are hearing a little bit of a delay and seeing a little delay from what I see on my screen, but it's fairly close, and it's also, those settings will hopefully give everyone the best experience, that you're not having any issue with stream quality and with it cutting in and out. So that's why I wanted to set it with there's a little delay, but that allows a buffer on your computer's end to make sure everything's moving smoothly. You can also turn down the resolution in a YouTube live stream, just like a YouTube video. You can click on the little cog icon in the bottom right, and you can move down the resolution if you're finding it's at all choppy for you, or if you're having delays. So with this link, I'm going to open that up now. And again, it's pasted in the chat, and it's going to take you to a little a Google slide. And you guys weren't joking. You're fast. People are signing up here, if you can see on my screen. What this is that's a collaborative Google Sheet. And I love starting off any presentation with Google Sheets, and I'm a big kind of a Sheets nerd, I would say. There's a lot of amazing things you can do with Google Sheets, like just, in itself. This is all set up, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's no concern about deleting stuff in terms of the email, the passwords, or the images. That's all locked. But you can fill out in the section under your name. So what this is a sign-up sheet to get your own, for today, a temporary Google for Education credential that you've already been pre-added to my Classroom as a student. And so if you could put your name, if you would like, again, this is completely optional, but if you want to put your name beside one of those sections, there's 50 accounts from GFE 1 through GFE 50. And again, if you come into this document, if you see there's a colored outline around a box already, someone else is there and is probably in the process of editing it. Again, we're talking about a collaborative document with up to, there's 46, I think, people viewing right now. So yeah, it can sometimes have a little delay. So just try to find a spot where you see no outline around, just to make sure you're not overwriting somebody else's credentials. There's lots of space right now from 33 on down, I would say. Again, if you prefer to just follow along with what we're doing, you do not have to worry about signing up at all. You can just watch and enjoy what's going on here. Now, once you have your sign up, you've put your name and you've claimed your spot there, you'll notice there is an email and there's a password listed to the left. The email are all going to be in the same format, GFE and then 1 through 50 at gsefe-school.com. I couldn't make the domain. This is for demonstration accounts like this. And the password for all of them is Go Google 1. So even if you are, that doesn't matter whether you're GFE 1 or GFE 25, the password's always Go Google 1. So Emily, and just look at your question. Should you create a new account even if you already have one? If you want to take part in some of like the interactivity of today's session, yes, because this is going to allow you to sign into a Google for Education account that's part of my testing domain here. It's part of my demonstration domain for today. So if you get your credentials, you've got two options here. You could either make a new Chrome profile, or you can use an incognito window. And I'll outline what those two things are. But so in Chrome, I'm assuming some of you are joining us in Chrome, but I'm doing this in Chrome here today since we're talking about Google for Education. But this, again, same process works in other browsers, in Edge and Firefox and Safari. They all have their own version of in private browsing, basically. But in Chrome, you click on the three dots and you can either select New Incognito Window, which will open up a window that looks like this. It'll come up on the screen here in a moment for you. And it's got like a black outline showing that you're incognito, meaning it's not tracking browsing history, cookies, things like that. So you could use an incognito window. You could also just create a separate Chrome profile. Profiles are a great thing to utilize in Chrome and in just any modern day browser, where you can separate your work browsing from your personal browsing. I have a personal Chrome profile and I have a work Chrome profile, and it allows me to easily switch back and forth and find my history and my passwords for those separate things. In this case, I'm going to add a Chrome profile for this GFE1 account that I created. So I'm just going to put it in like that, GFE1. Doesn't really matter what icon you choose. It's going to synchronize with the Google database here. And I'm going to click Add. And if you've never made a Chrome profile before, it'll bring you to a little sign-in screen that looks like this. And you can actually click Sign In. Because you are given credentials, you actually already have credentials you can use. So you can click Sign In. And my login is gfe1 at gsefe-school.com. And then you can click Next. And your password, again, for everyone is going to be Go Google 1. Now, if you prefer to not make a profile, and if you're just using an incognito window, you won't have to enter these credentials until you go to a Google Workplace or the Google Classroom, till you go to one of those applications. Then it's going to ask you to sign in. You can accept this privacy policy. These are just demonstration accounts. They get automatically deleted in 14 days. So you actually can, if you want to experiment around and play around, in my test Google Classroom here over the next little bit, they're active for 14 days. Some of the people in this afternoon session are going to be using them as well. So if you are in this afternoon session, you can, I'm going to clear that sign-in sheet, but you could sign up again with the same number if you want. But yeah, they will be reused by some of the people joining this afternoon as well. But I'm going to accept the terms here. And then again, if setting up a Chrome profile, it's going to ask, do you want to link your data? That just means, again, if you were to sign in on a different device, do you want to keep track of the browsing history? and have it synchronized, your browsing history, your passwords, things like that. So we are now in this demonstration profile. You can see if I click on the profile icon on the top right, it says 1GFE. That's just the automatic accounts that were assigned, but now we're signed in here. So with that account, now that you're signed in, you are able to join into our Google Classroom. So at this point, I'm going to shift back to the slides here in a second, outline that. And just checking the chat. I think everyone's no other questions specifically about that. If you do, again, feel free to type it in. But you could, with that new account, navigate over to classroom.google.com if you like. And we're going to start our meeting. We're going to actually start a real Google Meet synchronously here in just a sec. I'm going to make it so you're going to have to wait in the lobby though before you come in. But now that we've got this sign up sheet, we're ready to move along. Something else in here I just wanted to mention. Again, I mentioned that I'm a bit of a Google Sheets nerd, and there's like a lot of things you can do with Sheets. So something like this, just a quick sign up. I put a link in this document as well, though, where it says more fun with Google Sheets. If you're interested in opening that up, I'm going to paste this link into the chat here as well. This is just another template of a Google Sheet that I wanted to share with people. Let me just copy that link so I can paste it into the chat here. But it's an example of a way that you can do a sign-up sheet. I'm just going to show you quickly. This is not really part of today's session. But this is what the sign-up sheet I created, this template, looks like. You'll see it on your screen in just a sec. It is a sheet where you can have people enter their names. If you know, like I made this template for a session we were running where people signed up to join a PD session all about Google for Education. And so I actually knew, this, I just made it generic with the school names here, but I knew the schools in our board where people are going to be coming from. So they actually could choose from the drop-down list. And the reason that I've kind of structured it like this is it uses a lot of what's called conditional formatting and data validation. And so instead of people just typing in their role or their workplace or their level taught or their subject taught, when they type those things in, if one letter or one character is different from the way somebody else typed it, it means you're not really going to be able to get any data from that. You're not going to be able to collect kind of any information if everyone types it in a slightly different way. By using data validation and drop downs like this, where you force people to actually select what their role is or select the school or level, then you can have it start to automatically tally some information. And so, this sample, like when we had about 35 or just about more than that, 38 teachers from across our board join us last year for a Google for Education session. As teachers filled this in, they came in, we got a breakdown exactly of what level were these teachers from. What cycle were they from? What subjects were they teaching? What was their previous knowledge of some of the Google tools that we use? So it's a way, again, even just the checkboxes, they're set up that you can select them, and they use conditional formatting that it turns green when you select it, for example. So looking at Felicia, your question there, this was all done directly in the sheet. So this is not linked to any sort of Google form. I just shared out this collaborative sign-in sheet that day and had the teachers go in, they filled out their name, and then they again went through those drop downs or the check boxes just to select where they were coming from. And then you can do fun things like you can put in images. You can actually insert pictures and images into a cell in your sheet. So the example here was choose an image to represent your current mood. You could do that. So that's just a little aside, but I wanted to share that with you because I know some people here already have experience with some of these tools, but this is an example where you can do a lot more with something like Sheets than sometimes what's on the surface. There's a lot of really nice things you can do in depth, and really all of what I learned to set this up, I learned the majority of that through doing that level 2 advanced course that I had mentioned on the Educator Center. It goes into a lot of details into products like Sheets, into further depth, and so that's where I learned to do things like the data validation, the conditional formatting. So I wanted to share that with people there. Now, we're going to get back to the main agenda here, which is to start looking at Google Meet as our first learning intention. And I could actually hear on my end that a couple people are already waiting in the lobby for the Google Meet. So it means some of you have already navigated through to our Google Classroom and are starting to try to join the Meet. I'm just going to quickly just show people again, once you have that credential, again, you've gone to that sign up page, then you can use the link. You can either type in classroom.google.com or you can click on the link here. I've actually got it already open, the next tab, but you can click on that hyperlink and that should bring you to Google Classroom. Now, you have to, again, be using that demonstration, the demo credential to access this. But once you're there, it should bring you to a landing page that looks like this, where you'll see you're already enrolled in 2 classes. You're enrolled in economics, but that's not what we're going to be using today. You're also enrolled in the EdTech with Google for Education class, and that's the one we're gonna use for our Meet and any sort of demonstrations. So you can go ahead and click on EdTech with Google for Education. We're going to go through this session as well, assuming that there is some knowledge already of Classroom. In kind of the information I got from James and Alex in setting this up was that a lot of people have experience already with Classroom. So we're not going to spend lots of time on the details of setting up the Classroom. We could maybe, let's see if we can, set a record for how quickly you can set up a Classroom. It doesn't take long. You click on the plus sign, you click on Create Class, put in your class name, type create, or hit create, I should say, and you're done. And that's it. That's all the time it takes to create a classroom, and you'd have a class, then you can start customizing from there. But in this case, we're going to use this pre-created one where you've already been enrolled. Just if you are new into the classroom, as soon as you make it, you have a code, a class code that you can just display on the board if you have students in person, and they can go to classroom.google.com and click join and then type in the code. So that's the fastest kind of way to get students to join your class. You can also, though, copy an invitation link and email it to them. If you have a class distribution list, you could email the invitation link to them and they can join that way. I actually prefer to add my students directly so that, the first day of class, they don't have to do anything. Just like you did there, they would go to classroom.google.com and they would see that they've already been added to the class. And so that you can do under people. You can just add your students directly. And again, if you're in your board domain, if you have a Google for Education domain, it should allow you to search through your directory. So where you just actually start typing your students' names. You don't have to write their full email. You just start typing in their names. It'll find them in the directory and you select them. And you'd have to do that 25 or 30 times, depending on how many students you have. But you do that once at the start of the year, click invite, and that way they're automatically added to the group. They don't have to use any sort of join code. They don't have to, use a link in their email. They'll just see the day they come into class and they go to Classroom, they'll see they've been added to your class. So we're going to work in this EdTech with Google for Education team. And so we're in here now. And one of the great pieces about Google Classroom is how it now integrates Google Meet for online learning. So you see here, I've already set this up. One of the options you have when you create your class is, do you want to generate a Meet link? And this Meet link is going to be set up that, again, only the students in your class are going to see this. But it's also set that students cannot join that Meet link without you. They cannot start a meeting when you have not activated it. So you can actually leave that Meet link visible. If students were to copy it and share it out with their peers or people outside the organization, it doesn't matter. Unless you as the teacher have actually started that Google Meet, nobody can actually get into it. And so that's a great, again, feature of this, is that it's very easy for students to connect to their online classes because they literally they log into Classroom and at the time of their class, they click on the Meet link. be right beside that little video camera icon. But again, outside of class time, you can just end the class when it's done, and there's no concern about people using that link without you being present. So that's just something I wanted to mention related to that. This is the way that we really recommend doing online classes with students. If you're going to use Google Meet and you are in the Google for Education world, rather than trying to schedule things in the calendar and set up Meet links where there's different options, whether you use like a nicknamed Meet they call it, or just use a randomly assigned one, the best and the safest way to have your students connect to a Google Meet and to an online class is to always create a Google Classroom first. I would really strongly recommend that. Even if you're not going to use Google Classroom for really anything else, you may not use it for posts or for homework assignments, things like that. I would honestly take the time to set up your Google Classroom just for the fact that it creates this Meet link with the permissions that you want as a teacher. This is going to be set that again, it doesn't matter if that link gets shared out. Only once you start the class will people be able to join. So once we're ready, I've actually already started this, as I mentioned, but once you're ready, you would just click on that Meet link, and you can do that now. If you're here with us and if you're following along, obviously if you could split, your window with the YouTube live stream, and you could maybe have your browser tab with your demo profile in another window. That's a great way you can kind of follow along, and be doing these things in real time. Or if you have a second device, you can use another option as well. So I'm going to switch over to the Meet link, and you can see that right now, nobody should be part of my meeting. But I can see multiple people want to join the call here. There's lots of people who are waiting to get in, and I can view all, and I can admit people one at a time, or I can just click admit all. I can also deny all. I could deny people entry or deny single users entry. But this is, again, I'm going to show how I've set up this lobby, okay? As I mentioned, you as the teacher are the only one who's going to be able to start that class meeting. You don't have to worry about students starting it. But I like to turn off what's called quick access. And I'll show you what that is in just a sec. Quick access allows people to, once you've started the meeting, they could go into your classroom, use the link, and they could get into the meeting without you having to admit them one by one. I personally like to always have a meeting lobby enabled. It's really recommended by Google, by Microsoft, by Zoom, any of the the major video conferencing platforms as the most important security feature for safety in online classes is having that lobby where, again, if your credentials were to get out, if someone was to log in from outside of your class but part of the organization, we want to actually be able to ourselves be able to look at the names of the people who are trying to get in and decide whether we're going to admit them. Now, in this case, I am going to admit all of you. Remember that we're doing a YouTube live stream with my screen being shared right now. This YouTube live stream is unlisted, so it's not publicly available. Only people going through the distance education the sign up for the conference would find this link. But I would recommend that if you're going to connect here to our virtual Google Meet, you probably want to disable your camera. Okay, again, just because it is being recorded, I'd recommend you turn off your camera. So I'm going to click admit all, and I can see there's a number of you waiting to get in. So I'll click admit all. And you can see we've started our class. And I'm going to mute microphones as well. Let me do that here. There we go. Okay, so I've got that muted. If you can keep your mics on mute, just again, so we're not getting any sort of background noise or echo at all, that'd be great. And again, you're welcome to continue to join in, and I will permit people in as you join. So we're now here in our Google Meet, and this is what we want to take some time to outline all of the details related to Google Meet. Hi, Avi. Hi, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So once you're into your Google Meet, so as a teacher, again, the process, hello, a teacher, once you go through your classroom and you've opened up your Meet link for the day, again, you don't have to worry about your students joining beforehand, but here is an all-important icon. And I just realized I'm going to try and make it, I had set this up yesterday and then I restarted my computer. And I want to make it a little easier for you to see my mouse, my cursor, because I know on a YouTube live event, it doesn't always show up all that well. Let's just see here. So this is a little thing, but you should now have a highlight over my cursor, which will maybe help you be able to follow along a little easier. So as we get back into our Google Meet interface here, the first thing I do as a teacher once I've started that meeting is I click on this big blue shield. And again, only someone who is set as the host of the meeting, so this would be yourself or a co-teacher that you've added to your class. So if you've got a resource teacher, you've got a teaching partner you work with, either one of you would be able to start the meeting and we'll be able to use these host controls. And now this is a kind of key thing that I wanted to outline as well. The reason that I at the start raced off to start the meet myself is that as the classroom teacher, I always want to be the host. I would like my resource teacher be able to be joined in and kind of moderate with me, but I want to have the host controls. And so that's just something that if you're in a co-teaching environment, to always talk with your resource teacher, your co-teacher about, saying which one of you is going to start the meet, because only the person who starts the meet is going to have those host controls, which entails things like starting and stopping the recording, who is the owner of their recording if you did a recording of your meet, and again, just some of these additional controls we're going to look at. So that's an important thing to discuss. Some teachers have worked it out that it's the opposite. The resource teacher is the one who manages the host controls, manages kind of students in the class. And so they like using that model. The resource teacher will be the first one to start up. The classroom teacher joins in second. The classroom teacher can focus on just, their content and their students. But if they have a co-teacher or resource teacher, they can kind of facilitate the controls. Now, all of this being said, for a lot of us, you don't have that luxury of having a second person teaching with you. You are on your own for a lot of your classes, so that you don't have to worry about this. But it's just something I wanted to mention off the top here. So once I start up this meeting, I did this already, but the first thing I recommend you do is you click on the blue shield icon. And these settings, this is something that I'm hoping Google Meet is going to change in the near future. But right now, these settings reset to the defaults each time, and you can't set what those defaults are. The default is that quick access is on and that people can share their screens and send chat messages. I like to disable at least the first two. I usually do allow chat messages, and I will allow them in just a sec here. But I always recommend coming in and turning those off as soon as you start that meeting. And so that means, as a teacher, maybe I pop in 10 minutes, even 15 minutes before the class starts, turn these settings off, and then just wait for class time to begin. And then you could even leave your computer. Nobody can get in with the quick access off. You could leave your computer, come back at the time of your class. You'll see students waiting in the lobby, and then you can admit them all in. But this little shield icon, that shows you again some of these key settings. The quick access piece means that if this was turned on, it says that people, again, in the organization with the meeting link could join in. And so that gets back to a question I think Emily had about, although our Meet link is only listed here in our Google Classroom, if students were to share the Meet link out, whether prior to a class or in class, if you have quick access on, it does have to be a user within your organization, but it means that students from another class or another grade level could potentially get into the meeting. And this is another reason why I really, really recommend turning off quick access. That means that, again, even if it is someone in our organization, they have valid credentials, but I can see the name, right? And it won't be 10 GFE, 11 GFE. In your Google for Education domain, in your board, it will have student names, and if they're not on your class roster, you don't permit them in. That's a huge piece in terms of safety. I really, really recommend that. Now, the one, still potential for having someone get into your meeting that shouldn't be there would be if a student is misplacing their credentials or sharing their credentials. So if a student decides to, share their login with somebody else in another school at a different grade level, then in that case, they would be able to get in. But again, you're going to see the student name. So you would know that it's that student who either shared their credentials or lost their credentials, and why someone's joining in from their account. So I just wanted to outline those settings there. I think there was one other person trying to get in, so I'll admit you in from the lobby. And Google Classroom or Google Meet gives you a nice little, it's like the ring of a doorbell when someone's waiting in the lobby and you see a little message pop up, and there's an admit button right there to select. So it makes it very easy for you to admit people in. The other thing, while you're under this purple or the blue shield icon, is that you have view all host settings. So this little gear icon here, this allows you the same thing. It shows you that quick access is off, sharing screen is off, send chat messages is off. But I can also get into changing my device settings for my camera, or for my microphone and head or audio output. So if you have, more than your default microphone, or if you have a set of headphones attached, you can change your audio and video settings right here to make sure you're using the correct webcam, or using the correct microphone and speakers that you want. Those can be adjusted in real time during the meeting right there. All right, so now that we're in, I think we've got everybody into our meeting that are supposed to be here. And I'm just looking through the chats and see, it's like we're in Inception. We're in a meeting inside of a meeting, inside of a live stream. We're gonna just go through again the main controls. You have, obviously, like you're joined in now, and I can see you're all muted up, but you've got your mute microphone button there. And when you hover over any of these icons too in Google Meet, they'll show you the keyboard shortcut, which is nice. So you can see, quickly turn on and off your microphone. You can click Control D. You also noticed on my screen there, it may have popped up quickly, but it'll say, are you talking? Your mic is off. Click the mic to turn it on. So it actually notices that your microphone's disabled, but your mic is definitely picking up input. So it hopefully will save you from having long conversations where no one can hear you. Beside that, we've got the camera icon, so you can turn camera on and off with Control E very quickly. And in the middle is the hang up button. Now, note about the hang up button. We want to make sure that even though as we're a teacher in this Google Classroom and my students have joined in, you need to make sure you remove students from the meet, or just make sure that you're the last person in the meet. When you end the call here, it does not disconnect students that are in the Google Meet. So that's something to be aware of as well, is that you as a teacher, if you click hang up at the end of class time, your students will still be connected if they're still on. So you have to, again, the basics as they learn the kind of details is that you tell students, okay, we're going to end class at this time. You'd ask them to sign off, and you can just watch as they leave in the participants list, which we'll show you in just a sec. But you can watch as they leave, and if they're not leaving, we can remove them. But you always want to make sure that everyone is removed before you hang up. That's again, an important detail in terms of student safety. So that brings us to these functions like the participants list and the chat panel and these other options in the Google Meet interface. So I can see here this grid of people that are in the class. You can see it's a 3x3 grid by default, but you can adjust that. Just looking in the chat, there is no press spacebar to talk and hold spacebar to talk like there is in Zoom. Yeah, that's not something I've seen it on a feature request for Google Meet, but it hasn't been implemented yet. But often as a teacher, we need to see more than 9 people, right? We're talking about classes of 25, of 30 students. So to change the number of screens you see, that's found under the vertical ellipsis in the bottom right. Now I'm going to move my window. Actually, I'm going to just switch so you can just see my screen. I'll hide my face here for a little bit so you can see all the controls. So in the bottom right corner, you can see that the vertical ellipsis button. And if you click on that, this is where you find all of your additional settings beyond what's listed in the main interface. And one of the main tools then that we want to adjust is the change layout. So that change layout button, that's going to allow you to define how many screens can you see at once, what is the view that you're using. And so in this case, I really encourage you as a teacher and your students to you can move that up. And again, as you add more feeds, it's going to impact, again, sometimes bandwidth required for the call. But in most cases, again, it doesn't have a huge impact on most machines, the number of tiles that are shown. So now I can see up to 49 video feeds as people turn on their videos. And again, if they're not turned on, you just see their icon like we see here. The other main controls are under at the top here in terms of our toolbar. So we've got our person icon, our Bonums, as Lisa and I say, which is to show everyone. And that will open up what we call the participants list. It shows you who is in the call. And it allows you to, again, with these students, you'll be able to see whose microphone is active. You'll also be able to, with the 3 dots beside their name, you can pin a single video feed to your screen if you want to focus on just that student. You can also pin selective numbers of video feeds where you could have a group of students that you're checking in on rather than seeing the full grid. You also, when you click on the 3 dots, if the person's microphone was on, you'll have an option to mute their mic. So that allows you as a teacher to mute their microphones. And again, that is really it's something that your students will not have access to, so you don't have to worry about students muting each other, but you can mute anyone whose mic is active and they're not aware maybe. You can also remove people from the meeting right there. So I don't know who signed up for 10 GFE, but if you're being really disruptive to the group here, we could click on the 3 dots and you can, with a single click, remove them from the meeting. And again, we've got our lobby on, so they won't be able to automatically rejoin. They will be able to ask to get back in, but they don't automatically get admitted. So we also, in this menu here, you can see we've got a quick shortcut to host controls as well at the top. So if you do want to quickly change settings related to things like the chat. So, this group is very respectful, very well-behaved group here. So we're going to enable chat. And if we click on that, it's going to allow your students now to access the chat, which is this next button over, the little speech bubble icon. And I'll say hello, everyone. And we're writing this again in the Google Meet. And yeah, so you can see the chaos that ensues when you open up the chat. The great thing about Google Meet is how easy they've made it to toggle this on and off. If you can see here on my screen, there's this little green toggle that says let everyone send messages. All you have to do is click that off, and in real time, it will lock the chat for all of the attendees, but you have the power still. You can still write messages to the class, and you can send them important announcements, but they don't have the ability to use the chat. So again, it's a really, really quick way to moderate that. And it's real time. You can toggle it back on and allow people to keep working with the chat. So it's back on, so yes, you can use it. The other piece that I wanted to mention before we just stop and just check if there's any questions. Again, I think people are doing a good job of kind of going through and typing them in. A lot of you are answering each other's questions, which is awesome. Lisa's answering a bunch of them. But I will take a minute to go back through and see if there's any that we haven't answered. But a really important tool, which it's very obvious for students, really, because of how prominently it's displayed. But there is this raise hand option here. This allows your students to really quickly indicate when they have a question. So if anybody wants to raise their hand in the class, you're welcome to do that. You click on that little hand icon in the bottom toolbar that says raise hand. And this is going to allow, see, you can see here, I've got these icons and they appear right beside my students' names in the grid, which is great. Whether their video is on or not, I see this little raise hand icon. And if I have my list of participants open, it shows up at the top here as well. It moves them into a separate section. So that's a great thing to be able to quickly call on the group to moderate, and to say, like, you've asked people to have their microphones disabled, and maybe again, you've disabled the meeting chat, and the instructions for your students are, when there is something that you want to share, if you got a question, just raise your hand. You can call on them like you would, and then they can unmute and ask their question. If they forget to mute, you can always, again, you can do that yourself. You can click on the three dots and mute them. But it's a really helpful tool here. It's a little thing, but it's very helpful. If the students forget to lower their hands, you can do that for them. You can see beside their name, you can click on where the raise hand icon was. It turns to a button that says lower that you can just click on. The other piece to this is that you can use it, if you want, for very quick in-class polling. So I'm going to I'll do a kind of quick example. Everybody who is in our Google Meet, how many of you are currently using Google Classroom? Could you raise your hand if you are using Google Classroom already with your students or in your school? Could you please raise your hand if that's the case? If you do not use Google Classroom already, just leave your hand down. You do not have to raise it. So this allows us to, again, get a really quick picture. Now, everyone's going to see this, so students can see as well, their peers who have their hands raised. So it's not something for anonymous polling where, it's a check-in that's going to be sensitive and that you want to be anonymous, but it allows you to get a really, really quick gauge on where people are at there. The other piece here is that instead of lowering hands one by one, we just finished, that poll, I'll just click lower all, and it will lower all the hands for me. So again, just a way that you can use this not only for kind of moderating when people want to ask questions, but also just to get some student interaction and for them to be able to share, their response to something. Obviously, chat is great for that as well. You could say, okay, so here's something I'd like you to take part in. For those of you who raised your hand and said you're currently using Google Classroom in your school or in your role, could you type into the chat on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your current comfort level with Google Classroom? 1 being it's just brand new to you. Maybe you just saw it today for the first time. 5 being you teach it to people on a daily basis. You feel like you're a pretty serious expert in. I see a 6. I like that. That's good. So you can use that chat, and again, not anonymous. Everyone is going to see each other's responses, but it allows people to, again, really, really quickly in a single interface share their responses. And for you as a teacher and for your students, it is the most simplistic way to do that, right? With the raised hands and with the chat, because there's no navigating to any other links. So for our youngest students, it works really well. Like, again, even our youngest learners can learn to open up that chat dialogue and to type in, if it was a number, let's say like that, to type in a number, or to type in, you could do a letter response. You could say, you could share your screen and have 4 options on your screen of choices, like a virtual choice board. And students could just type in the letter. Do you want to do activity A, B, C, D? You could also use this to set up breakout rooms, which we're going to talk about in a bit here. But you could use that to help define where people want to go. So I want to just quickly pause there for a minute, just give people a chance to, are there any other questions, like kind of burning questions with what we've done so far that anyone wanted to ask? Again, feel free. I'm just going to take a minute to scroll back through the chat here myself. And I'll bring my video back up. I'll say hello to everyone. So just taking a look. Yeah, looking at like some comments. Tracy was mentioning how chat is such an incredible part of class engagement, but it does need to be moderated. It can get, absolutely, it can get out of control. My daughter's in grade 1 in the Ottawa Carleton board, and she's in a Google class, in a Google Meet right now next door. I don't know if you can hear her, but her class seems to be pretty good with it. The teacher doesn't turn on chat all that often, actually, in grade 1. But my nephew, who's 5, the teacher doesn't usually moderate the chat, and the students in his class in senior kindergarten have absolutely know how to type into the chat, and whether that's just gibberish, but it does get distracting. And so I think it's a good idea to use the chat, maybe selectively. You don't have to have it enabled all the time. You have it disabled for portions where you really want people to focus on the content, on what you're presenting, and then you enable it for those portions where you want feedback and you want sharing. Again, it doesn't mean that your students can't ask questions on the fly. They can use that raise hand icon, and even that, when people raise their hand, that can be an indicator of, okay, maybe now I'm going to re-enable the chat to allow people to type in if they prefer not to use their microphones to ask. So those are some of the key functionalities in Meet. Now, I also wanted to outline a couple of the other additional settings. There's closed captions, which in terms of accessibility for people is a huge piece. Now, I've got my microphone off, so it's not going to appear down here because I don't want to, I'm already using my mic to pick up the live stream here. But if I had my mic enabled in the Google Meet, or if anybody else did, it will show people live captions, and it's attributed to who is saying it. So it'll actually, the interface is able to pick up which student is speaking, and it will have their name attributed beside their captions. So that's something, again, that's going to be a really helpful piece for accessibility for our students. And it's prominent right there. You just click on turn on captions. The other button beside, I think really clearly labeled, this is for screen sharing. The Present Now button is where you find your options for sharing content. And let me hide my video feed again, just so I'm not blocking out any content. But this is, again, you can share your entire screen, so your entire desktop. Anything that would be on your desktop is going to be visible. You can share the window of a single application. Where that, again, if you want to share your browser, but you're switching between multiple tabs, you would want to use that option to share the entire window of that browser. Or you can choose a single tab. And that, you can see below, it says best for video and animation. If you are trying to share a video synchronously with your class, so a YouTube video, something like that, it is absolutely recommended that you're only sharing that single tab as the source of the screen share, and not your whole desktop or even in the entire browser window. The performance in terms of the student's end of seeing that video and hearing it will be greatly increased if you're only sharing the tab. That being said, some of you have probably experienced it. It's not perfect. Trying to play a YouTube video synchronously with a class through Google Meet and sharing it, it's depending on people's connection speeds, depending on your upload speed as a teacher, it's not always the best experience in terms of quality and being able to view that. Honestly, often what I recommend is sending the link for that video you'd like people to watch. You could assign it in Google Classroom, as something to view at that specific time. You could paste it into the chat, but just allow people then a 5-minute, window where they're going to view it. They're still on your synchronous Google Meet. They're still in your online class, but you're going to give people that 5-minute window to view it by opening the link on their own browser and viewing it. It's going to result in generally a better experience. But those are your options in terms of presenting. Again, key thing to be aware of too as teachers is if you select your entire screen and you are sharing, like it says, your entire screen, be aware that means anything that pops up on your screen or your desktop background, an email notification, that is going to be visible to everyone in your meeting. So again, I really recommend sticking with the window, a single application window, or the tab. I would really only use the entire screen thing if you are jumping between different programs regularly. But again, the nice thing with Google for Education is everything is web-based. Everything's done through your browser. So really, you could just select window and choose your Chrome browser and do all of your sharing through that. And then you don't have to worry about, notifications popping up on your desktop, about, images and things that you might have as backgrounds. Students won't see that content. So the last pieces here under our Google Meet are these 3 dots. And we had shown this quickly before, but this is where we can do things like change our layout. The default is that it's going to be 9 tiles each time, and that it's on auto, where Google Meet will shift the interface based on what it thinks is the best view. Is content being screen shared? Is it only content being screen shared or no one's speaking? Is there no content being shared, but lots of people talking? It will set the automatic view, the best view, it thinks, based on that. Tiled, like the name suggests, is going to show you everybody in a grid, and again, up to 49 feeds if we move that slider up. Spotlight is going to focus on just the active speaker, and it will switch. And this is what we call like the motion sickness mode, because if you've got a class of 30 elementary students and everyone's talking at once, you're going to get some pretty quick changes in whose video feed's active, and it can be hard to follow. Sidebar is the mode where it's going to have an active speaker in the middle and then other video feeds along the right-hand side. So that can be a useful piece as well for students, where again, they can focus on the teacher's view, but then if they still want to see video feeds of some of their classmates on the side, they can see that and still get an engagement with visual feedback and cues. Most people generally leave it on auto, but again, really recommend people, again, don't think that Google Meet is limited to 9 screens. Just adjust that slider to how many students are in your class or your meeting. So that's under the change layout. And then we also have our recording controls found here. Recording can only be started, as I said, by you, the classroom teacher who started the meeting, or your co-teacher. And that recording will automatically save once the meet ends to your Google Drive. Google Drive will make a folder specifically titled Meet Recordings, and it will automatically save there. And it's great because it allows you to, it actually sets sharing permissions on the recording for the class that the recording was part of. So if you want to share that recording out in your Google Classroom afterwards, the sharing permissions are already set that your students will be able to view it. But other people not in your class don't have the rights to view the file. So it's a great kind of automation it does. It's going to automatically set the recording permissions. Full screen, like the name suggests, just allows you to hide anything else on your desktop. It allows you to hide your Chrome toolbar. It allows you to hide your Windows taskbar at the bottom if you're using Windows. So that's a nice piece for teachers and students, just again, for students especially, just to really focus on solely the content of the meeting, not get distracted by the 20 web-based game tabs they have open in their browser along with your meeting. That can be a helpful thing. And then lastly, a couple other options that you might use in here, the change background. Again, I don't have my video feed on in the meeting because I'm using the video feed for this live stream, but you can change your background and you can either blur. So this would be no background, a slight blur, or a serious blur. It's going to really do a good job of really blurring out any content in the background. And Google Meet's also now introduced these virtual backgrounds. So you can select from these preset virtual backgrounds. There's no ability right now to upload your own custom ones, but you can choose from this preset list. And so that's, again, a little thing, but great for student privacy and security and safety. If you are going to have your students have their video cameras enabled, having them have the option to use blurred backgrounds or virtual backgrounds is a great piece where then they don't have to worry about what does their environment look like compared to their peers and their classmates? Like, what does their room or their house look like compared to others? It takes that out of the equation, and it makes generally people a lot more comfortable to have video on. Now, that's not going to fix, our secondary students who are sometimes very reluctant to have video on in classes, but it can help. And then lastly, going down, really these are just additional, you can get access to your additional settings. We had access, this will bring up our audio and video settings like we saw before, and you also have access to the captions again from that list. So those are the main interface controls. And just looking back in the chat here, Yeah, so everything we've done, because I see this come up in the chat a lot, in this demo account that I'm running this from and that you are a part of, this is a Google for Education enterprise domain. And that's something that is fairly new into the world of Google for Education. There now is an enterprise tier. It is not free. A Google for Education enterprise license equates to about $60 per teacher per year, $60 Canadian. So that's again something that in the past most boards and most schools have had free Google for Education domains and are now maybe considering that, weighing that option. Everything we've done up to this point is in the Google for Education, the free tier. When you have a Google for Education enterprise license, you get this little fun looking icon here, the triangle, the square, the circle. This is the activities pane. And that becomes available with an enterprise license. And I'm going to demonstrate what that is. Again, I wanted to focus the majority on the free tools, but this does allow you for some useful classroom application tools. So if you are in an environment where you are teaching on a daily basis using Google Meet, I would argue that $60 is probably worth it for the year, in terms of what it opens up. And again, if Google Meet and Google Classroom are your primary, your main learning hub and your daily video connection for, online class, it does open up some nice functionality. But again, it has that cost. One thing about the enterprise license is it can be applied selectively to different teachers. You do not need to purchase an enterprise license for your entire domain. You can apply it per teacher that's going to be using that. So if you have some teachers that teach daily using Google Meet, they can have a Google for Education enterprise license assigned, whereas other teachers who might want access to G Suite or Google Workplace, but not need the enterprise features of Google Meet, they don't have to have a license assigned. So that's an option as well. It also only needs to be applied to the teacher. Students do not need to have licenses changed at all. As soon as the teacher has a enterprise license, the students will be able to use all of these tools as well. Again, as students can see these things, but the teacher is the only one who can actually start them or set them up. And I'm going to quickly demonstrate what those look like now. I'm going to do this is a poll. So if we click on these three dots, and again, you can see you've got quick access in the midst of the chat, the participants, and the activities. But I'll do a poll as our first one here. So I'm going to click Start Poll, and it allows you, I'm going to say, do you see value in an enterprise license? I'm curious to know. Do you see value in an enterprise license? And I'm just going to keep this really simple. Yes or no. No other option. And we're going to, now a great thing about the polls is that you can save them and use them later, or you can launch them right then. But you can actually, while students are working on if you have them working on an independent task at some portion of your lesson, you can, give them an activity to work on for 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. And then while that's happening, you could be setting up these polls. And again, if you're not screen sharing your screen, then they're not going to have an idea that you're setting these up. But then when you want to send them to students, you can click launch and it will make this live. And also you have this toggle to, do you want everyone to see the results or not? The results are going to be anonymous, but you can decide, do you want people to see them? In this case, I'm going to select yes. If I needed to make any edits to the question, the answer options, I can do that here, or I can delete it altogether. But in this case, I'm going to click launch. Emily, I wish you could save them for future meetings. You cannot, unfortunately. It would be a great option, but right now there's no ability. Like once you set these up in your Google Meet, you exit that meeting, when you come back, even for the same class, it's not going to be there, unfortunately. They're unique to each meeting. So if you want to answer, you should see in the Google Meet now that a poll has been presented to you. Again, I'm in the teacher view here, but on your end, if you're in the Google Meet, you actually see a notification pop up, which again, it does make for a great, easy to interact experience for students where it's housed right there in the meeting. Like they don't have to navigate to any other site. So I'm seeing a lot of people do see value. Like right now, it's 100% for people see value. Again, it's a shift because everything up to this point, Google for Education has been free, and this does require that paid tier. But at $60, I'm thinking about, how much teachers spend often of their own money anyways on things throughout the year. $60 Canadian for a year license. I that's for a 12-month license. I do think there's value in that. And again, especially when you can look at selectively applying it to just the teachers that are using it daily. If you were not in an environment where you're teaching online, you don't, in terms of what's opened up with the enterprise tier, it doesn't change much with the rest of the Google for Education environment. But for your Meet, if you're teaching online daily, I do think absolutely there's value in it. So that's a poll. And then we could end this, so I could lock this now and people can see the results, but it's locked. People can't continue. And we could start a new poll then if we'd like after. In this case, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you the Q&A. This allows people to, if you have your chat locked and you want to have a little bit of a more moderated environment, you can turn on Q&A. So you should see on your end now that the Q&A is open. And I'm going to lock this for a second. I'm actually going to not allow questions. And but just to demonstrate, but you can, when you're ready, toggle that on. And now people can click on this Ask a Question button, and they get a little dialogue here to write their message. So I would say, I'm going to ask a question here as well. What features of Google Meet would you find most impactful for your class or for your students? So I'm going to post that as an example. If anyone else would like to though ask a question, feel free to do that, because I can then demonstrate what this looks like from the teacher perspective. People can click on a thumbs up and upvote that question. So I can see here that 4 people have upvoted this question, which that's a great way, again, where you can have the chat locked. So you turn off your chat. I didn't do that. I'm going to do that now. I would lock my chat, so it's not, again, like free kind of conversation in the chat, but then you can have your students be able to ask questions and their peers can show that they have that same question. That's a really powerful piece as well. It allows your students as well who are a little more shy maybe and not willing to sometimes to put their voice out there. It allows them to show that they have that same question though, and they support that same question or viewpoint, and they can upvote that. This as well, like, it doesn't have to be limited to a Q&A. You could have students do this for sharing like debate points, textually, where they could share it, share a statement that they have. And again, the students could upvote the ones they support or they agree with. The nice thing about the Q&A is that if anything comes through that's really inappropriate, that again, you don't want anyone to see, I can click on this eyeball icon to mark as hidden, and I can hide that question from the group. I could also click on the trash can to delete that question. Or we could, what we should be doing here is the teacher is answering the question. What are the other benefits to an enterprise license? The other benefits really just come with, you have expanded Meet capacity. So you can have up to 250 people on a Google Meet, a single Google Meet, versus the default of 100 on a free tier Google Meet. Your meeting recordings, Google's kind of extended this right now, but at some point your meeting recordings from a class meeting in a free tier, you will have to make sure you save them somewhere in your Google Drive. They won't automatically be archived indefinitely. Whereas with the enterprise license, you don't have to, actually make sure to save that or post that meeting link somewhere. It will be available indefinitely, all of your meeting recordings. So that's one feature. Outside of that, it really is just in Google Classroom assignments. So in assignments with an enterprise license, you do get access to things like You can do checks for similarity. So it can run like an online similarity checking to see if student work is potentially being sourced from other sources on the internet and not being cited properly, and even against each other's student work. So that's another tool that comes with the enterprise license, is that similarity checker in assignments. These features were all released. I'm going to and again, what you can do with this too is you can check when it's been answered. So you can, for yourself, you can click it off and again, just keep track of what have I answered, what haven't I. The features got released, the Google for Enterprise tier got released back in the early fall. And again, those are the three key components right now in the Meet: the breakout room, the poll, and the Q&A. But yeah, they've been there about since the fall. And again, I can always navigate. It's really nice because I can just come right back and it doesn't lose any of these pieces. In terms of features on a cell phone, are they integrated? So if you have a student joining a Google Meet on an Android phone or on an iOS, an iPhone, as a teacher, you cannot assign people in, you cannot create these from a mobile device. You have to be in your desktop browser to do that. Your students would be able to answer or ask Q&A questions and answer poll questions on a mobile device. The breakout rooms piece is the one where I have to do a check for you and a check about whether you can assign people in breakout rooms currently on a mobile device. Previously, when it was first rolled out, I do not believe you could. You could not assign students that were not in the web-based version of Google Meet into a breakout room. I know there was talk to change that and to make it available for students joining on mobile, but to be honest, I'm not sure if that's been integrated just yet. So that's something that I will check on, and I could make sure to follow up. I'm going to send some follow-up resources to everybody who registered for the session and can be posted on the site. But I'll make sure to get that answer because, yeah, I know that it's in the works. It was planned to be done. I'm just not sure if right now, if you would be able to assign students into a breakout room who are on mobile. The teacher, after the meeting, does the teacher get an email recap? There's no automated recap, Emily, in terms of answers there. You have, so like right now, I often have done things like where you just take a screenshot. So I take a quick little screenshot of my view on the screen and can kind of select that for both. You could do that for the poll and the Q&A. But that's kind of the recommendation I'd use right now. So for the breakout rooms, I saw there were a couple questions about that. If you've been part of a Zoom breakout room or a Microsoft Teams breakout room, it's going to be very similar. It's accessed right through the activities. Click on breakout rooms. And then we can now set up breakout rooms with this pencil icon. You can choose your number of rooms. You can set a timer as well that you want it to maybe end after, let's say, 5 minutes. If you don't like the automated breakouts that it's created, you can shuffle them and it will reorder who's in your rooms. And you also have the ability to rename them. So this could be like, you can assign people then into rooms based on their task. Like what task do you want to have them working on? And you could give then each group a separate set of instructions based on that room that they're in. So you can rename them. And to rearrange students, it's really easy. You literally just click and drag and move them from one room to another. So you can just click and drop them. If you don't like the arrangement, you can assign them exactly as you like. And that, again, think about the way then you can have students that you know are going to work productively in the group together. You can assign them into specific groupings. No students will see when you're setting this up. They won't see you, unless you're screen sharing. They're not going to see that you're setting these up in these specific groupings. So this is another thing where if you can have students working on an independent task, it can be really helpful to give yourself that little bit of time to get these structured the way you want. And then, have people say, okay, come back from the task you're doing, and now we're ready to start our breakouts. And then you'd have them all set, ready to go. When you're ready, you just click open rooms and people would be transported into those breakout rooms. In terms of the timer, This is, I was just looking at, yeah, students will be brought back at the end of the timer. It'll give them a notification as you're at the end of your timer. So like we could do this, maybe we just, for an example, do it down to 1 minute. This setting here, it will end the room, you can see, after that time has elapsed, so after 1 minute. So I'll open the rooms just as a demonstration here. We've got 4 rooms. So I'll click open. And people will be starting to be transported into your breakout room. And if you're still following along with our live feed though, you can see here on my end, it shows that these are only gonna be in session for 1 minute. So you're gonna be in our breakout room very quickly. And it does take some time to assign people. You can see it's like slowly kind of one at a time, people are getting added in. It takes a little bit of time to just shift people over. But then as the teacher, I can just click join and get into any room I like. I can also see our student there, student 14 GFE asked for help, and I can join into their room. Again, your room's gonna end in 18 seconds because we set this up really quickly, just for the sake of time, because I still wanna show you Jamboard and a couple things. But you as a teacher can quickly join that breakout room. Hi, Lisa. I can see Lisa's here. We're gonna be brought back in 3, 2, 1. Back to our main call. So there's a really quick whirlwind of breakout rooms. Now, the nice piece is after the breakout rooms end, everybody's brought back into the main call. And you still have, you'll see once everyone's shifted back into the main call, you can set up your breakout rooms again. You can, again, customize them there. You could shuffle the rooms if you prefer and reset them. It'll keep the settings it had before, but you could then do a quick shuffle if you like and just reassign your groups. You could even change your number and shuffle. And so now you're expanding the amount of people that students are working with. There is, let me just see here, Emily, there's no way to send that I've seen an announcement, a text announcement to the students in the breakout room where you could send a single message that's going to go to everybody. That again is something that I know I've seen listed in terms of feature requests, and so it's probably something in the works currently. But right now I haven't seen that ability like you have in some other platforms where you can message the entire group from the main room. But so that's a quick kind of rundown of the breakout rooms. And again, I can clear these if I want to restart them. And this would allow me to manually place people too. I could just have everyone in the main call and just kind of place them one by one at my own pace as well. So those are the 3 functions that are in that enterprise tier. And again, it's something that it is, again, obviously a $60 per year cost. I think you have to look at how much are you using that online portion. If you're using Google Meet on a daily basis for online classes, I definitely think there's opportunities it opens up that aren't available otherwise. So in that case, I think it can be worth it. Now, I wanted to also show you again the piece related to other ways you can have that collaborative learning. We're looking at, I think lots of the stuff we've outlined right in the Meet interface. And the reason I wanted to spend the majority of time in the Meet interface, a lot of you work with younger students, and it can be challenging to get them to navigate between all different places, which is why as much as you can do in a single interface through things like chat, through using the raise hand, through using, if you have access, polls and Q&A, that's really helpful for the student experience. It makes it so much simpler for them. And so that's why I really try to focus on those tools as the primary part of today. Another piece though that is really well integrated with Teams, with our Google Meet and with our classroom here is, can you tell I do lots of training on Microsoft Teams as well? Those things slip in from time to time. But you can also use Whiteboard, which is going to open up Google Jamboard. And I'm going to click on that. You can see it's right in my 3 dots, my meeting options. I click on Whiteboard, and I can start a brand new one. Or what I love about this is I can choose a pre-created Jamboard that I already have in my Google Drive. And these are some of the ones, the templates that I'm going to share with you in today's session. They're already in they're already in our slides. I can just show you here. There's two links that I put in the slides here. This first one is an article from Matt Miller's website, Ditch That Textbook, written by a guy named Chris Sasinger, who's great. He offers some really cool stuff online. But this is a great site. This is where I got a lot of the templates from. These are all available to be shared with everyone, and it explains again, what these templates can be used for, and a little rundown of them. But then I also provided this link here, the Wii Jamboarding. Can have some Bob Marley jamming outro music maybe at the end of the session, although that would get us banned from YouTube, unfortunately. But I've shared this folder with you here, which is going to be all these other templates. Some of the ones from that article I've already included in their general education, but I've collected lots of other kind of subject-specific templates that you can just make a copy of. So you'll have to, again, in your account, click Make a Copy, but then you can access these. And then right within your Meet, you can choose a Jamboard you want to use. I'm going to use this Jam check-in. It's a 1st to 5 check-in activity. So I'm going to just select that. I could even search as well if I know the name of the specific one, but I'm just going to select that because that's the one I'm going to use. Click Open Jam. And you can see on my screen, it is opening up this Google Jamboard window. And it's a separate window, so you can rearrange it. You can have it like side by side, even with your Meet, so you could still see student faces if you wanted. Like I could, in Windows here, pin my Meet to one side, and then my Jamboard to the other, like that. And I could then again still see my student faces, which is really cool, and see their interaction. But this allows you, I think it looks like 35 of you are on here. You should be able to edit and just go ahead and take one of these sticky notes. And I haven't given you a task, but the task for this Jamboard would be, how are you feeling with these tools that we've showed today? How are you feeling in terms of being able to potentially implement these? And again, you can, I also didn't give a criteria, like a 5, I'm going to say a 5 would be you feel comfortable implementing these tools into your practice. At least one thing we've shown today. Is there one thing you can implement into your next class with your students? That would be a 5. 1 would be like, please help me. Yeah, this has been way too much, which we could do. We can reach out and help you. And again, all these resources are going to be available going forward. The Teacher Center is an amazing thing. The cool thing about the Jamboard check-in like this is that you could revisit it then later. So an idea that a lot of teachers use, that like you present something like this at the start. So say, based on our prior learning, prior knowledge, how are we feeling right now in this part of the unit about this given concept? And get students to put their name down, drag their sticky to how they're feeling that day at the start of class, and then after a certain portion of your lesson, maybe do it midway through the lesson, and then again at the end of the online class, say, so how are you feeling now? Where would you rank yourself now in terms of these concepts? And it's something that again can be, you could again take a screenshot or save a little PDF of it at the start, and then allow people later on do the same thing, and you can see that progress over the course of a class. So that's something. Need license. I see some people writing. I agree that there's definitely some really cool value in those tools. This Google Jamboard, you do not need that enterprise license for. It is completely integrated with the free Google for Education experience. And so you can do that regardless of what your license type is. Now, this Jamboard, again, it's going to be saved into our Google Drive once we're done. So, this will be accessible, and I could actually lock it as well, where I could decide afterwards that I want to not make it so it's accessible to all my students. It, by default, because we shared it in our meeting, it made it so that anyone in our organization with the link can edit. It's already made those settings. I could just switch this though to viewer, and I could really then quickly say, I do not want people messing with our board anymore, and I'm going to make it view only. You could also do that right at the start of the activity to give your explainer before you allow people to start using the board. And again, this is just one template. I really, really encourage you to look through that article listed here. There's some awesome activities, again, really targeted for distance learning and for creating engagement and community and trying to bring that back to our online classes. And then there's also a lot of subject-specific templates in the second link, and again, that's one example is showing, but you can do so much with Jamboard. You can have a slide for every one of your students. So we could have 30 frames where every student gets their own single space to work on, but then you as a teacher can see all of their work in real time. And they can use sticky notes, they can use text boxes, they can use shapes, they can use inking, they can add images, they can take stuff from their Google Drive. So there's really, you can use a little laser pointer if you like. So there's huge amounts of stuff that can be done in Jamboard, and those templates can be a really helpful piece. So just looking here, we're at 10:30 on the dot, so I don't want to keep us any longer. Looking at questions. Kara, no problem. I'm happy to share them. Again, most of them are things that were shared with me and I've collected just over the last couple of years. Robin, you are correct. Sorry, I said you're 30 students. You can only have 20 frames in your Jamboard currently. So yeah, you can't have one for a class of 30, unfortunately. That's something as well I've seen as a feature request that hopefully they're going to up that limit of how many frames you can have. But yeah, that would be, it's hopefully going to be something that they increase the size of. So we've covered the majority of our main pieces that we wanted to get to. In the slides as well, I linked a couple other activities that you can look at your own pace, but just things, again, like an interactive Google document where people can fill out their thoughts as a class. And then the other piece was related to forms, and that's something that I didn't cover in detail, based on time today. But that is a tool where, again, you can make quick little surveys, check-ins for your students, but you can also have really in-depth access to formative assessments. And that's something that, again, you've got access to that account, that license I shared with you. So feel free to browse this after the session. I've actually already sent out a couple of assignments that you can take a look at. And you can go through there. There's just various types of assignment options. But one of them here is a Google Form quiz. And you could go through and see how forms can be used for automated assessment, where you can actually have, your questions have automated feedback, be marked correct or incorrect, and give specific piece of feedback based on the answers that your students have selected. So that's something that's listed in there, and there's templates. I'm also going to add additional templates into the classroom, so if you want to see other examples of how forms can be used, you can find them there. So thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to keep the stream active for a little longer, that Lisa and I will answer any questions that come up as people leave. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Use those links. Feel free to share them with all of your colleagues. I'm going to update our the website as well, where you got the link to join today's meeting. I'll update that with the resource link as well, so you can find it there. And for those of you who are joining this afternoon, I'll see some of you there. That session is going to focus all about Google Classroom and really about using Classroom for assessment and assignments. And so in that piece, we are going to talk about forms a little as well. So if you're interested in joining then, feel free to join in. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time today. There's a lot of nice feedback there. I appreciate that in the messages. And again, you can, at any point, if you have any questions as well, I'm going to just put my email address in the chat there, and I'll make sure I update that. It's on the website for the session today. but I will also put it in the slides here. If you ever have a question specifically afterwards that you want to ask about any of the tools, I'm happy to address that if you want to email me directly. All right, well, otherwise, have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you.